I'm Karen Curry Parker, and we're going to be talking about something that I think is cool, interesting. I want to just sort of set the tone today that before we get too excited about the interesting things that are happening, I want to set the tone and really be honoring and respectful and not be so enthusiastic that it looks like I'm really enthusiastic that we're in a pandemic, because I'm not enthusiastic about that at all. I think that we are experiencing an enormously challenging and very difficult situation with the current global pandemic. And I certainly think that there are many tragedies and challenges that this pandemic has initiated. I'm inviting us to have a broader perspective on what's going on. A lot of the reasons why I want us to have a broader perspective about what's going on is because having a broader perspective is part of what's in the transits for us right now. It's also, I think, a good way for us to really find a sense of control and influence over our own experience of a situation that I think for many of us feels profoundly out of control. Please know that as I go through this, I get excited about the transits. I do. I get excited about the future. I really do, because I do think we're headed in a really beautiful place. I'm not excited about the pandemic. So I just want to be really clear. Without further ado, let's get rolling, because I have a lot of stuff to cover today. And I want to make sure that we have good enough timing to get it all done and not rush through it. So we are talking today about human design and the coronavirus, the second cycle. The coronavirus is an effect, not a cause. And that's something that when we look at the astrology of the coronavirus, that's something really important for us to continue to put into our awareness. It's an effect, not a cause. It is a result of the way that we've been doing things. And whether you want to drill down and say, you know, it was bats in a marketplace in China or created in a lab or whatever, the ultimate impact that it's having and the way in which it's impacting us is a result of the patterns that we have been individually and collectively embodying. And so it's a cause of these, it's an effect, not a cause of these patterns. We really are invited as we continue to go through this journey of potential transformation and evolution to really look at what in our pattern behavior, in our choices, what do we need to unwind and untangle and disentangle ourselves from in order to get to a more aligned way of managing not just this crisis, because this year has given us a lot of crises to tend to. And honestly, we're focusing on a lot of them this year, but it's not like these are the only crises that are going on the planet. And certainly, I think it's an invitation for all of us to look at what's going on the planet through the lens of compassion and with the intention of looking at how can we explore our patterns and where perhaps the choices and the patterns of the choices we've made have created some of these effects. In human design, we teach that epidemics begin with the sun in the gate 44 in line 4. That would put this pandemic actually starting November 3 and 4. It happened overnight in 2019, or it happened for 2 days. If you want to review the overarching story of the coronavirus and its beginnings in terms of the celestial weather, I did write, it's a tiny little book, a little pamphlet book, a mini book called Human Design and the Coronavirus. I will show you at the end of our call how you can get a copy of this little booklet in hard copy. It's available from my publisher, Grace Point Publishing. You can't get it in hard copy anywhere else because it's a taboo topic and they won't publish or promote any books about coronavirus. So even though this is really an astrology book, a lot of the book distributors out there were like, no, we're not touching that one. So our next cycle of the coronavirus, the birthday, if you will, of the coronavirus and starts on November the 2nd, 2020. So we're going from solar return to solar return, just like you do on your birthdays. We're going from the birthday of the coronavirus last year to the birthday of the coronavirus this year. And we're looking at the design in this call today. We're going to look at the design of the second year of the coronavirus and what that is potentially bringing us in terms of new awarenesses, new insights, expansion, and new hopes and possibilities and inspirations. And I'm going to focus strictly on those. So if you are living in the United States, you know that that means that we have sort of an interesting coincidence here, if you will, that this coronavirus second cycle starts on the presidential election of 2020 in the United States. So the election itself and all of the brouhaha around the election this year has been very much a part of the theme of the coronavirus. And I don't think it's a coincidence that so much of what we've been looking at around leadership and government this year has been influenced by the coronavirus and the things that we have been learning or learning that we need to shift and change because of leadership or failures in leaderships or the way in which we've been led. Those themes have been bubbling up for us to look at. And I want to invite you, and this is a difficult thing to say because I don't want to kick up a huge political conversation, but I want to invite you to maybe for this class, for the next hour, let's take the personalities out of the playing field. And let's not make this conversation when we talk about leadership be about this person versus that person, but rather let's look at the fact that we live in a democracy and our leadership is a representative of qualities of consciousness and energy. And that whether you will like the leadership or not, there's something in this leadership that our collective, maybe not you individually, but our collective put into power. And it's a leadership that's revealing to us what needs to be healed, what needs to be released, what needs to be aligned, and what needs to be brought to our awareness so that we can go to the next phase in our growth and evolution and expansion. That's not a comfortable way to look at it sometimes because it does mean we all have to go in and look at our own shadow. And certainly the coronavirus starting on the 44, the sun on the 44, totally brings the shadow up into our face. And we are being called forward to get nose to nose with that shadow and explore what part of ourselves has created our life circumstances and our life situations. This is a delicate conversation to have because the second part of this conversation, and I want to really be clear about that, so I'm not blaming the victim here. I'm not saying you caused the coronavirus or if you got sick, that's your fault. I don't want to even play that game. I don't believe in that game, honestly. But I will say there's something moving through all of us with this energy that's giving us an invitation to explore how can we bring ourselves into greater harmony with the heart of who we really are and ultimately with the heart of humanity. Every event, including your birth, has an energy design that's a synthesis of the planetary themes transiting at the inception of the event. These planetary themes, in essence, set up the curriculum, the soul curriculum for the event, and it helps us understand what we're supposed to be learning through these experiences. So if we look at the design of the coronavirus, this is the birthday design of the coronavirus this year. So these are these gates, these channels, these centers that are colored in. These are basically the core curriculum, if we will, the soul curriculum of what we're going to be exploring and learning from and pushing against and growing towards as we go through this second cycle of the coronavirus. In loose summary, and I'm going to go in greater depth, obviously, for the next bit. In loose summary, we are learning to shift into a global mindset. And I mean, how can we not, right? This is a tiny little fragment of RNA coated in proteins that has impacted literally the entire globe. And if we've needed something to remind us that we're all under the same sun, boy, did we get that reminding, right? And this shift of understanding that we are all connected and that the breath that I take here in Minnesota has the potential to impact somebody, way off on the outer edges of the Ivory Coast is such a vital thing that we need to understand. There is no way that we're going to be able to escape individually or collectively the impact of the health and the well-being of our world. And that is certainly a big theme that the coronavirus brings us. The coronavirus is also bringing us what I'll call an upgrade to our warrior qualities, meaning we are learning, courtesy of the coronavirus, how to really know what's worth fighting for, how to fight, if you will, in a way that is aligned with transformation, with visionary thinking, with possibilities. How do we endure, which is really one of the more mature warrior qualities that we're mastering? How do we endure? Oh my gosh, are we learning that? Wow. How do we endure and sustain ourselves even through the most challenging cycles of realignment so that we can really stay connected to what's really valuable in the world? And how do we make a place? How do we build for something that's really worthy of who we are? We are learning how to move from a rebellion, which is a more Mars-like, immature expression of a resistance, to integrating the work necessary to bring about real change. As a consequence of adopting a global mindset, we are building a global economy. And if we're not doing it yet, we sure as heck are going to. Because we're going to have to be taking stock of what's happening on a planetary level and start moving those resources around so that we can share them equitably and sustainably. And by the way, if you think we're not already doing this, I promise you that blackberries do not grow in Minnesota in winter. And thank God in Karen world, there is Chile, because I love blackberries in the winter and the summer and the spring and the fall, because we have a global economy. We are looking at corporate reform, which is a huge, huge thing that we're going to see, I think, over the next 7 years. And I certainly say the coronavirus is triggering the beginning of this cycle of corporate reform. If we look at the design for business through the lens of the human design chart, corporations don't have a design. Business is a deeply personal process. It's a process that involves the personal journey of transforming something that is fearful or something that is painful into something of value that we can use to serve others. Business serves love. Business serves the divine muse. And business, as we'll see later when we talk about it, business has to be grounded in ecocentrism, in this evolving consciousness, not egocentrism. And as we talk about, and we won't talk about this too much, but if you go back and do some of the solar plexus mutation, or if you hang on and read my new book that's coming out, The Quantum Human, one of the things that I talk about a lot is that the will center is a center that's under a tremendous amount of evolutionary pressure. It's changing, and part of what's changing is our definition of what's valuable and the way in which we use money and the way in which we do business. And certainly last but not least, this curriculum is bringing us an exploration in our own earth, how to make sure we are living aligned with our own integrity. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So before we go, or not before, but actually what I want to do is break down all the little parts of this design. So the first thing we want to look at are the nodes. And the way that I interpret the nodes is, to me, the nodes are sort of the plot outline of the story that we're living in. They tell the theme, or the main theme, the main plot theme of this current second cycle. So in this current second cycle, we are looking at the gate 45 as the south node and the gate 26 as the north node. The 45 brings in the energy of what we are, what we're learning, what we're grounded in, what we have or what we've been contemplating, and we are exploring what's necessary to move forward. I'm sorry, forgive me, I got that backwards. I knew that was backwards, I was looking that up. This gate 26 is in the south node. The gate 45 is in the north node. So forgive me, I flipped that around. So the south node is what we need to have in place in order to move forward to the north node. So the south node is saying, hey guys, while you're in this cycle, you're going to be really going deep into where are you in or out of integrity? Where are you in or out of integrity with yourself, with others, with your resources, with the world? Because when we're out of integrity, we're not sustainable. We can't sustain ourselves. And when we're in integrity, we are sustainable. And consequently, we can move towards the gate 45 called distribution that says, I can share the resources I have. I can, through my leadership, I can, through my natural state of wanting to give the extra that I have, my need to share, my desire to share, when I have my cup full and I'm sustainable, myself personally, then I can share what I have and who I am with the world. We are looking at where are we in and out of integrity? What do we need to do to bring ourselves back into integrity? Because when we're back into integrity, then we have sustainable resources and we have access to sustainable resources, and then we have more to share. We have more to give, more to help each other with, so that everyone can move towards a place of having a full cup and being in integrity. Our sun, this is always the theme of a pandemic. The sun is in the gate 44, the gate of truth. The gate of truth is actually the pathway to integrity. If we are out of alignment with truth, we're also out of alignment with integrity. The 44 also gives us a deep intuitive ability to understand the patterns of the past, to be able to look at those patterns in the past, and to be able to take the lessons from those patterns and transform the past, the pain of the past, the fear of the past, into something of value and something of power. So unraveling and untangling what is true and what is truth. And oh my gosh, isn't it so interesting how the coronavirus and the theme of truth has gotten so complex this year? That's the theme this virus has brought us. This theme is saying, hey guys, how do you know it's true? Let's look at that as a theme, right? We've been exploring this theme in so many permutations. If you go to Facebook, there are 487 billion different versions of truth about the coronavirus, just in like one little scroll of your feed. So the sun says, what do you think is truth? And what do you need to do with that truth? And how do you need to live in that truth? And how do you need to be in that truth? What patterns are you living that are going to need to be realigned so that you can live in deeper integrity, create greater sustainability, and ultimately have more to share with the world? That's our big theme. The Earth in the gate 24 brings us an interesting adventure. Now, the gate 24, I like to call the gate of blessings. It has the ability to take a stock of the big picture of what's going on in life, including all the things that have happened to you in the past. And it helps you find the blessings, the gifts in the lessons. It helps you find the bigger why, if you will, around why something's happening to you. So if you've had a pain, a trauma, a bad experience in the past that has been really hurtful, and if you've been stuck in the question, why did that happen to me? What was that about? Why did that person do that? That why question is not the most easy question to answer, but it's in finding the blessings of the experience. Maybe you're not gonna obviously condone what somebody might have done for you, but it's in the resolving of the trauma of the experience, the pain of the experience, the catalyst of the experience, that we often find those places within us where we begin to recognize that our challenges, our pain sometimes can actually be, with time, with healing, not necessarily in the moment, the greatest sources of growth and expansion in our lives. And so the earth energy is saying, hey, if you want to untangle yourself from all these patterns of the past, you've got to find the blessings in the lessons you're being taught, and then use those blessings to push you further into a cycle of growth and expansion and realignment with integrity. The tricky part about the 24, though, the 24 in its lower expression can sometimes be rationalizing. And when we have a theme of truth, sun in the truth, the gate of truth, and the earth in the gate 24, it can make the theme of truth very murky, because there also is the possibility that we can be really rationalizing things that are not true. We're trying to hope things are true and they might not be. And we can build an enormous amount of a case, if you will, behind it to cause ourselves to think that what we think is true because we can rationalize it. And again, with some of the other elements happening in this next year, we're not really going to be allowed to get away with that anymore. Truth is going to come knocking on our doorstep, whether we like it or not, whether we are, excited about it or not. And certainly this earth energy says that our biggest challenge right now for us to be more deeply aligned with truth and what's true is to find the lessons in what's happening right now, to not get too lost in the question why. Because the question why might end up being the unanswerable question, but to instead look at the shadow, if you will, and say, okay, it's dark, but yet what is this darkness revealing to me? And how do I begin the process of bringing my light to this darkness so I can work through these shadow parts of myself personally as a contributing part to a whole? Because the work you do for yourself in your own world adds to the work of the world being done. And of course, do your personal work, but then turn around if you feel so inspired and do your work on the collective shadow too. The moon is what drives us. So whatever the moon positions illuminate, these are part of what we're driven towards. I find this to be kind of funny. It's only, I can laugh about it because I have both of these gates in prominent positions in my chart. The gate 16 is the gate of zest or enthusiasm. The gate 20 is the gate of patience, and it is really one of the regulators of right timing. You really can't pull the trigger on something when you have the gate 20 unless the timing is right, or you push against right timing and then you burn yourself out. So we have this very interesting conundrum here with this moon energy that says we have all this get up and go, this giddy up, if you will, and all this yeah, but maybe it's not the right timing, which does have the potential, I think, for the next year to continue to kind of create a little bit of a push me, pull you kind of an energy around momentum. I think that's actually a really beautiful blessing, even though we don't like it. And I think when we look at a lot of what's happening with the research with the vaccine, a lot of what's happening with the dissemination of what do we do? What's the right strategy? Do we go to school? Do we not go to school? Do we have restaurants? Do we not have restaurants? Do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? Do we take vitamin C? Do we take vitamin D? All of this exploration with this passion about, but we got to fix this, mixed with, yeah, but in right timing, does have the potential to create a little bit of a tension for us about pushing and wanting to push. And certainly I would say the real mantra here is giving yourself permission to say, there is a divine plan unfolding here. I got to bring myself into integrity so I can stay sustainable and endure the changes at hand and be enduring for the changes at hand, but to not push against right timing, as tempting as it might be when you start to get impatient. I know that. So we have a lot of planets that are retrograde during this cycle, during this birthday of this cycle. So when we go into this cycle, Mercury is in the gate 32 in a retrograde station. It goes retrograde in the gate 32. Now, retrograde cycles mean that we get a do-over. We get a deep introspective process that allows us to rethink where we're headed, what we're doing, how we're doing it. And it's a good time to take stock of what's necessary to stay enduring. And hopefully by now you're starting to see there's some consistent themes here. We have, first of all, back up here in our nodes, right? We have integrity that is enduring, right? Because integrity creates sustainability. So there's enduring in being sustainable, because when you're sustainable, you have the energy to endure, right? And in the process of enduring, we have more to give and share. We see that we have, leading up to this integrity piece, this realignment with truth. We see not rationalizing and settling for less than what you want, not rationalizing something that's not true, finding the blessings in the lessons so that you can stay enduring. And we've got, this patience piece here that the moon brings us that says, look, all in right timing. And the 32 kind of says the same thing. The 32 kind of says, look, all in right timing. But, and here's the piece that's important, the 32 also says, and while you're waiting, get ready. This is actually part of business circuitry in human design. It's the energy that says, if you have a business idea, you got to start laying the foundation for it before you can pull the trigger on a sale, right? You can't go into a transaction and sell something you haven't created yet. Well, I mean, you can, but you probably shouldn't. Okay. You can't go into business and, promote yourself and not have the promotional materials created yet. You got to have like a website or a business card, or at the very least, a phone number or an email address, right? So the 32 says, while you're waiting for the right timing, follow those inner promptings around what you need to do to lay the foundation for the manifestation of your dream. So I certainly would say that a lot of the theme that we have for next year is going to be about laying the foundation for the manifestation of our dream. And certainly I would say we're in a 7-year dreaming cycle, all of us collectively, that is about creating a world of equitable, sustainable, just peace. That's what we're actually right now in the beginning of. And so the dreaming, the fantasizing, the imagining that we do right now, and the cues and the clues that we get to follow correctly according to our unique energy configuration are telling us what we need to do to set the stage and the foundation for building that dream. And certainly next year is going to be a building year. Next year is a year where we lay the foundation. And we lay the foundation, and we at least lay the foundation at the very least on a dream level, if not doing the actual work, no matter what the outer reality looks like, no matter what the outside world looks like. We build with enough faith that we take the steps necessary to put it into action, even if we can't see the evidence of it yet. Venus, which is where we have our values and what we value. Venus is in the gate 18. The gate 18, again, brings us the lesson of waiting for the right timing. And while we're waiting for the right timing, correcting the patterns, looking at what needs to be fixed, what needs to be aligned, what needs to be brought into greater harmony with joy and mastery. So again, this theme of cleaning up the patterns. So we've got cleaning up the patterns in the 44. We've got waiting in the 32 and the 20. We've got not rationalizing. We've got moving towards integrity. We've got a whole big cohesive theme unfolding here in many, many different ways through many different languages that the planets speak and the different ways the planets bring us the energies. But the big piece to understand is that part of the work of next year is the continuation of exploring the patterns and cleaning up the patterns, cleaning up the patterns that have brought us into this situation in the first place. Mars is also retro. And Mars is probably the one that gives me the little bit of the pause, for me personally. I think a lot of other astrologers worry a lot more about Pluto and Saturn. I mean, I would worry about those too. But this is the one that gives me the most amount of pause. Mars is where we have youthful lessons. It's where we have some of our rebellion versus integration energy. It's sometimes the planet that has war or fighting or conflict associated with it. And Mars in the gate 51, the gate of initiation, which is sometimes called the gate of shock, is certainly an energy that can bring about the unexpected. And that unexpected can cause us to metaphorically or, die to our old identities, to our old egos, if you will, and emerge as, through the catalytic process of sort of dying to our old self and being reborn, emerge into the full expression of our higher selves, emerge into the heart of who we are. So that's the high potential of Mars in the 51. But I certainly would say this energy has the potential to bring us a lot of tension, a lot of potential for unexpected events that could potentially rock our world and certainly rock our identity. And certainly are events that could potentially be very disruptive And we need disruption. Don't get me wrong. We really need disruption. And even if we don't understand the purpose of the disruption in the moment, with time and with patience and with the continued process of shining our flashlights into the shadow, we'll start to learn what about us needed to die for us to be reborn into the heart of who we are. But it does mean that things may still continue to be pretty unpredictable. That's a good word. Unpredictable for a little bit longer. And for us to learn to be resilient even when the landscape changes, which means the more aligned we are with truth, the more we can allow ourselves to emerge into the higher expression of who we are. Jupiter and Saturn are almost conjunct, not completely, but almost conjunct. They're both in the gate 61, the gate of wonder. The way that I teach Jupiter and Saturn is I say, whatever the challenge is, and Saturn brings us lessons that oftentimes facilitates our growth. The purpose of Saturn is to teach us. And oftentimes what Saturn does is Saturn burns away all the stuff we don't need, causes it to drop away sometimes fast, rapidly. And as that stuff that we don't need burns away, we're left with the core essence of what's really precious and valuable. And that core, that seed, is actually expressed through the blessings of Jupiter. Now you've got these two planets kind of playing in the same arena, the gate of wonder. Now the gate of wonder, I remember I started at the very beginning with looking at perspective. The gate of wonder gives us the big perspective on the big why of life, right? So we're playing with the 24, the rationalization piece, the electromagnetic of this with our earth energy. But so many planets have been dancing through this gate all year and will continue to do so for our coronavirus second birthday. The real purpose of this energy is to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what's going on. To not get lost in the moment by moment shifts and changes in the outer and inner landscape, and to instead allow ourselves to see the bigger picture and to remember and realize that we're in a bigger unfolding of something quite mystical and magical. And that we're literally at the beginning steps of where we're headed. And the more we can continue to watch with wonder and curiosity and awe, and with that wonder and curiosity and awe, stay in a space of expectant anticipation that even if you don't understand what the heck is going on right now, that it's a vital part of the process that needs to be untangled in order for us to get the clarity that we need to be able to move forward towards our bigger purpose, the bigger role that we play in the cosmic perspective. Our perspectives are shifting dramatically, and our understandings of what's happening will continue to change, especially because we're still looking at truth. And with this bigger perspective continuing to knock on our back door and tell us, let us in, right? With that bigger perspective, asking to come in and share with us a different way of seeing the current reality, we're going to reframe what we understand radically over the course of the next year. And the more we can relax and stay in the innocence of it instead of the heaviness of it, which again, I'm not trying to minimize the pain. I'm saying that this is the way to get through it because there's no way around it. We got to get through it. This looking at it from a place of curiosity and wonder allows us to find the answers that we might not be seeing if we're insisting on maintaining our old rigid perspective on how we think things should be and why things are unfolding the way that they're unfolding, and our judgments perhaps around our perspective around what's going on. Uranus is also in retrograde, and haha, look, we got a theme going here. It's also in the gate 24, the gate of blessings. Again, bringing us these unexpected epiphanies, if you will, that help us see the bigger why more clearly, that are helping us go, oh, I get why this happened. And reminding us that when we stay focused on the lessons and the understanding that everything happens for us, to us for a reason, and we continue to find whatever that kernel of that reason is, and use that kernel of that reason as a driver for the work that we need to do to build what's next, then we'll be able to navigate our way through this cycle of unpredictable upheaval that Uranus has been tossing us around in a lot all year. So Neptune is also in retrograde. You can see there's a lot of retrograde energy happening here. And again, it's going to really continue to create this sort of cosmic push me, pull you effect. And again, with the underlying theme of endurance, it's going to be important for us to really continue to cultivate long-term strategies to stay resilient, to stay connected to our spark, to stay connected to our creative fire, and to not get depressed or despairing or to give up or quit or to abdicate our role in building what's next. It's our time. That's why we're here right now. It's our time. And we cannot afford to get tired, which means we have to focus on what needs to happen for us to endure. And not to just endure by getting by, not endure by watching Netflix and eating Cheetos, but endure with our spark and our fire intact. Because the world that we're getting ready to construct, if we look at the big perspective over the next 7 years, amazing things are coming. Amazing, beautiful things are coming. A cycle of massive reformation and rebirth and renewal is coming. And it's going to be, I think, a beautiful opportunity for us to let go of all those things that have been burning us out and making our life kind of meh up until this point. It's going to be an opportunity for us to really tap back into our creative fire and the source of our inspirations. The gate 22, Neptune, is our spiritual planet. It brings us our spiritual theme. With the gate 22, the gate 22 is surrender. I also call it grace sometimes. It's that place where we learn that if we have the faith and if we stay in that curious expression and allowing the power of our imagination to tap into new quantum perspectives, new quantum realities, new possibilities for our lives, then magic happens. The fulfillment and the answers we're looking for shows up, and sometimes it shows up in ways we never could anticipate, magically, if you will. And that power of that surrendering and trusting that even if you don't know what's going to happen, if you hold the dream and hold the energy, we're going to be fine. Pluto, again, a planet of expansion. We got Pluto again in the 61 energy, this energy of wonder, again pointing us back to, we got to have a different perspective on what's going on. We have to have a broader perspective. We need to open up our mind. And actually an interesting thing, the 61 is also an energy where we connect to esoteric wisdom. We're going to be finding more spiritual answers, more spiritual understandings to some of the more earthly challenges facing us. And I certainly would say that I do believe we are facing not just a virus crisis and racial tensions and racial issues and sustainability issues and global climate change issues. We're in the midst of a spiritual crisis. And if we can resolve our spiritual crisis, I think that the other challenges will find solutions, or we can't do it passively. We will find the other solutions necessary to bring about a world of equitable, sustainable, and just peace. Chiron gives us Chiron is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It's the thing we need to master to step into the maturity of who we are. It's the pain that keeps triggering us and causes us through that triggering to have to really rethink things. It's also an energy that is the energy of anticipation. It's an energy that gives us the insights about what we need to do to prepare in anticipation of what's next. What do we need to prepare? So this goes back into this theme of enduring, sustainability, preparation, divine timing. So again, there's a large part of what we're looking at that's going to give us the insights necessary for us to be prepared for what's next. The shadow side of Chiron in the 17 is that it's opinions. And again, when we have these themes of truth and rationalizing and being in or out of integrity, this theme of truth and this theme of opinions certainly continues to potentially be problematic. So looking again at how do we distill out all these possibilities and find the ones that are aligned and truth for us is important this year. So other things that are going to be kind of part of our curriculum. We are redefining this year with this theme, the relationship between power and money. And this is actually a theme that's part of a bigger cycle of evolutionary shift and change too. When we look at the solar plexus mutation, certainly this is also a theme in the solar plexus mutation for those of you who are familiar with the fact that the chart itself is undergoing a big change. And the chart itself is changing the energetic hardwiring of what it means to be human. So we are entering into a cycle where we're really exploring and redefining the relationship between power and money. We are laying the foundation for a quantum economy, which is going to require that we have healthy people, that we have money, or we start redefining money as spirit in action, that we begin the process of changing the way in which we employ people and work with people, and we have livable wages. There we are moving towards, as we've talked about before, a global economy where we are creating economically in an ecocentric versus an egocentric way, where we are building businesses and doing business around sustainable practices, where we are incorporating into our businesses and our economy land stewardship so that land as a resource becomes sustainable. And we are moving into a cycle of, I think, a huge cycle of massive quantum creativity. So certainly when we talk about we need healthy people as a foundation of a quantum economy, an evolving compassionate economy, that means we need people in the world who are physically healthy, who are in physical integrity, who have resource integrity, meaning they use their resources well and in a sustainable way, who are authentic in the expression of who they are, who create from a place of moral integrity, meaning you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and you know you don't have anything to lose if you do the right thing, and who have the energy, the sustainable energy to facilitate what's next in the cosmic plan. Again, I won't go too much into these because I know I've covered these a lot over the last year, but healthy people need to be in high expression of all 5 core areas of integrity. And I would say that if any of you are involved in any way in a business that helps create healthy people, you're on the leading edge of a quantum economy. And if you've been wondering, when is it going to be my turn? It's your turn. Healers, nutritionists, people who help people access and tap into deeper levels of well-being, it's your time to play an active role in our economy. We're going to be redefining money. Money, if you think about money, the way that we use money and the definition of money has evolved. You know, we're no longer bartering. We're not giving away cowrie shells or coins. You know, money has become highly complex. It's so complex that sometimes we can be moving money around on our computer screen. We're not even touching it. It's kind of a really interesting abstract thing, right? So we are going to start looking at using money differently. Our businesses are going to be moving towards exploring how do we partition the use of our money differently so that we're using some of our money for buying, some of our money for lending, some of our money for gifting back to the communities that we serve in. I like to think, and this is actually a concept that comes from Rudolf Steiner, which I think is just flippin' brilliant, that maybe the way we need to start using money as spirit in action is we need to age money. It needs to expire, kind of like your milk in the refrigerator, right? And that if we start looking at money as a resource that needs to be used so it doesn't expire, it keeps that energy, that consciousness, and that movement of that spirit in action in movement, which is, I think, a problem that we have right now. We have a lot of money in our world right now that's not in movement. And so it's not able to, the money, I think, itself is crying and saying, I want to be used to do good things in the world. Let me free, let me out. We use money, we begin to use it, we'll see money as a tool for evolving the world. And certainly we begin the process in this cycle of redefining what do we need? What do we need? And certainly I would say the isolation and the quarantining, I think has certainly caused many of us to redefine what we need. I sure as heck would rather have an intimate meal with people I love than to have some fancy schmancy thing that I'm not going to do anything with. That's just one tiny little minimal need that I have, and I'm sure for many of you, you have different needs. Money is evolving, and it is becoming sensitive to the human soul and spirit and to the needs of the world. And I really want to invite you all, as we start to think about changes in the relationship between money and power, and the coronavirus, I really want to invite you into thinking about money itself being a living, breathing, spiritual entity that wants to serve the world, and start having a different kind of a conversation with money around what it wants, what it's seeking in the world. Human beings have evolved far enough to use and invest the movement of money with the intention of using it to heal the world now. We're at that point that we really need to be engaging with money and the use of money differently and start seeing it as a healing tool. I joke, it's not really a joke, but it's kind of a joke. In the Old Testament, there is a story about manna, and it's probably my favorite story in the Old Testament. And basically the story goes like this. When the Israelites crossed into the desert and escaped slavery out of Egypt, they didn't have any food with them. They didn't have any water with them either. And they were panicking. What are we going to do? And God came down to them and he said, look, I got this covered. I'm going to give you this stuff called manna. And every day you're going to have enough. And you have to go outside and gather what you need for yourself and your family for that day. If your neighbor can't take care of themselves, you can gather extra for your neighbor. But if you take more than your share, it's going to rot. On the 6th day, I'm going to give you double portions so that on the 2nd day, you can engage in the sacred act of resting. I think that's a really good story that embodies how we should be using money. So maybe we should call it manna-y instead of money as a joke. All right. The second thing we need to be thinking of, we need to be reframing the way in which we pay people. We've got to pay people wages that reflect the value of the goods they create and stop paying them money for time, because that's not enough. And the way in which we pay people isn't supporting the flow of money and abundance in the world. And of course, we have to continue to build a global economy because we're all going to need each other. We are building towards eco-centric versus egocentric businesses. We are building towards sustainable practices and supporting sustainable practices. And as I said, land stewardship needs to be a part of business. And of course, we are creating towards expanding quantum creativity in the world. So just briefly, what is quantum creativity? Quantum creativity is different than the way in which we create now. So let's talk about quantum creativity in the context first of what it's not. We are living, most of us, from a place of being situationally creative, which means most of us are creating in the moment. We're creating in a way that's reactive. We are creating in a way that's determined a lot by our conditioning. We are creating in a way that's short term. We are creating in a way that's finite, that comes from the conditioned mind. We are creating in a way that is a result of our thinking and trying to figure things out, and in a way that's reasonable. As we continue to be forced by the forces of the planet, by the forces of the stars and the planets, as we continue to have to just let go of everything and surrender, thank you, Neptune, right? As we continue to be forced to have to heal our trauma, thank you, Sun in the gate 44. Thank you, all of these forces that are moving us towards living in integrity. As we heal our trauma, as we move ourselves into a more aligned, sustainable state, we stop being reasonable, because being reasonable is really just about reliving old patterns. And we start becoming fundamentally creative, meaning we transcend conditioning. We begin to create beyond what we think is possible through epiphanies and revelations. We believe and we trust an infinite source as the source of our creative answers. We create from a place of imagination and possibility. We are living in a way that is aligned with cosmic order and is consequently unreasonable. That's it. That was it. That was kind of an abrupt end. All right, so I jammed all that in there. I hope you got at least a good overview of where we're headed next, what's possible for us. Again, I just wanted to throw this in here because several people have asked about my coronavirus book, and you cannot get it in paperback on Amazon because Amazon thinks it's a book about the virus, not about the planets. So if you want to get a hard copy of this book, if you go to my publisher, gracepointpublishing.com, go to the store. If you go to the store there, you can order hard copies of this book. And if you stay tuned, I will be posting here next week actually a written summary of what we've talked about today. And as I said, I will also make sure that I get the slides to you. All
And
right.
Kevin, there was a couple interesting. Rebecca posted on November 4th, the asteroid Wuhan will be in gate 60 along with Saturn,
Oh,
FYI.
of course. What else, right? That's awesome.
And yes, there is an ebook.
You can get the ebook on Amazon, just not the cute little book. So,
And
yeah, thank you.
Lots of comments of people agreeing with what you put on Facebook. Not a lot of questions. Actually,
Good.
no, but it was a lot of. So they can find them all if they're looking for the other quantum alignment shows. They're on the Facebook page, but they're also on the blog.
Mhm.
And I think they can. We have keyword searches, or you can see a keyword tag. So sometimes those would be a faster way of looking.
And our blog is here. It's on quantumalignmentsystem.com. So you go there, we have our blog. There's all kinds of stuff there. Other than our blog, there's videos, there's blogs, there's ways to connect with quantum human design practitioners. There's all kinds of good stuff in there. So go check out our webpage too.
There was a question from Anna. How long do you think the pandemic is going to continue?
Honestly, if I look at the transits, I think we have at least a good year and a half in front of us. No, and I think that I honestly I think we have another we have at least for the next 4 to 5 months. We still have some disruptions happening. So it's going to be an interesting time. And again, I think if you keep going back to do your own work, clear up your own patterns, and think about what do you need to do to be enduring. I think that's that's probably the question right now. How do we need to be enduring so that we can sail through this with grace, so that we can stay connected to our authentic self and really continue to cultivate the energy to be able to do what we do in the world. And that means you got to do self-care. It means you've got to do the things that are going to keep you sane and grounded. You've got to do the things that are going to keep your own cup filled up. And I certainly would say, there's a lot of old-fashioned things we can go back to doing that I think are really important, including cultivating a relationship with your creativity, for example. I think we've gotten so comfortable being watchers and observers and not doers that we've become so comfortable being consumers and not creators that it really is an important time for us to get back into our creative essence and giving ourselves permission to create, really literally create in the way that we think of traditionally as creativity, because it's a stress relieving thing, but also to look at creativity as a path to expanding our way to see possibilities. So light bulbs are as an example of quantum creativity. Literally the idea of a light bulb was an epiphany. So that's an example of quantum creativity.
Well, I saw a couple questions that had come in, but we're at the top of the hour. Did you want to take one or two more questions?
Take one more question, and then I have to scoop because I have a class on how to sew a doll with my daughter as part of my creativity protocol. So.
Well, then Lindsay's question is very on Facebook says, what are your favorite kid quantum resources?
My favorite kid. Okay, so I have to honestly say I don't think kids need quantum resources because they already get it. I think the most important thing with our kids is to not shut down their dreaming. Don't make them be practical and grounded and squished into being reasonable too quickly. They understand inherently how to use and harness magic, how to stay in that creative flow, and what they need to take care of themselves. And I would certainly say for the kids right now, especially for the kids right now, because they're being thrust into a way of living that is so unnatural for them, to really let them judge for themselves what's enough and how and really enforce them staying connected to their creative flow. and get them outside and get them connected, reconnected back to nature. If they've gotten disconnected, get them away from the screen as much as you can, and sit down and do art with your kids, or read out loud with your kids, even if they're teenagers, and stay connected to those heart places with our kids. And not, it's so easy when we're doing work from home to want to shuffle them over somewhere else where they're being entertained, and to really rethink, how do you do your life and your schedule so that you're living from this more grounded, connected, heart-based place. Good. All right. I'm going to go do art with my kid. You all have a great weekend.